What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to the Pitlane podcast, episode number 38 today for the Formula 1 testing. Testing number 1 has completed, 4 days at Barcelona, and we're going to talk about it. Also, obviously, the car launches. Previously we didn't do a podcast over that weekend, as all three of us were quite busy then, but we're going to try and do a roundup of all the cars and what went on in testing, giving you our thoughts. But you're joined by your usual host, myself, Arav, Callum, and Tom. I'm going to hand it straight to Callum, because he seems like the most organised out of all of us, because if you didn't know, I was up in Birmingham.
Big-ass notepad of all stuff to write about.
So I'll give Cal the lead on this podcast, and take us away, mate.
Right, so I think the best way to go through testing is, because obviously there's 4 days, but it's probably best to do it team by team, just because it just makes sense. And we may as well start off with the world champions, who look unlike what we thought. Normally with a big change in regulations, normally we see a little bit of a shake-up, but I don't know, fortunately, depends who you support, Mercedes do seem still the team to beat. They put in the most amount of laps with 558. They put in the fastest lap time, albeit on ultra-soft tyres, which is actually 3 seconds faster than last year's pole. And overall, they're looking very, very solid. Both drivers are looking up to it. And I think, unless they have some sort of other problems, Australia might look quite strong for them. And I'm not sure what you two feel about this. Is it a good thing that Mercedes have still retained? Is it showing that Mercedes are one of the best teams in Formula 1 at the minute?
I mean, clearly that's the case. I mean, they are doing the best job. The power unit is just... You could tell as soon as, like, when they launched their car, on the same day they launched their car, the reports came out that some engineer had said that they've improved every single area of the power unit. So it's sort of like, okay, so yes, Ferrari and Renault can improve their engine. I haven't included Honda in that because they've just gone backwards. But the other two manufacturers could improve as much as they want, but Mercedes can also improve just as much, and they're staying on top. It's sort of like they really have surpassed Red Bull completely in terms of, like, people thought Red Bull's dominance was like complete, but Mercedes have taken it to another level, and there's much praise, but at the same time, it would have been nice for a shake-up. But really, honestly, like all three of us have said all year round, like only now have people start to really debate all of these rule changes. We've been saying it for like a year now, that honestly it wasn't ever really going to change that much, because it's really just 2016 but faster lap times.
Yeah, I mean, we can hope, but it's looking like the same old thing, and if I ever hear that the Red Bull period was dominating, then I don't want to hear from you again, because this is definitely far worse.
This is something else.
Especially for a neutral. So, take off your rose-tinted glasses for a second and realise that this can't go on forever. This is not good for the sport. So, Ross Brawn, get to work.
Well, that's the thing. It's like Mercedes are almost emulating. They have surpassed where Red Bull were, because obviously they made use of the
leaps and bounds,
Formula.
Because Red Bull had that 2012 year where they weren't on the pace at all. Vettel was struggling very early on, and only it took him till Bahrain to actually get that win. And even 2011, it was there was plenty of wins, but there was also times where people like Hamilton, that McLaren, just looked way stronger than them. It was only really 2010 was
2010 was not like he peaked up. He just popped up out of nowhere at the last race.
2010
was like,
they popped out of nowhere. For most of the season, it really was Ferrari versus McLaren versus Red Bull. It was three of them. 2013 was really the only. 2013 and 2011 were the only real big ones, whereas Mercedes have been there consistently 3 years in a row, and now a fourth year in a row. So it's going to be interesting. The only saving grace is this time Ferrari. It's difficult because I want to say this, but also don't want to say it because it feels like we're jinxed it every single year. But they look better, and I think the biggest saving grace, is not their car, not the fact their car looks better, like more aggressive, more innovative than they ever have done, is the fact of they've just said nothing. They've just gone quietly about their business, and they've not done the standard. As what was it? I can't remember the American guy from NBC. Can't remember. Will Buxton. There you go.
Oh yeah.
Will Buxton saying they need to become less Italian and more kind of just European, German, just get down
German,
to work.
like when Ross Brawn was
less
involved,
Italian, less Italian,
more
basically.
efficient,
And they've done that. And basically they've just stopped shouting about how great they are and how they think they're going to progress, and just got down to business. And I think it's going to help them just mentally.
You know what the thing is? It's when you compare them back to Mercedes, though, it's like Mercedes excel in every department in terms of their driver lineup, in terms of their team team lineup as well. Obviously, we haven't spoke about this on the podcast, I don't think. James Allison is coming in March.
Yeah.
What better team personnel than
You've
James
already got
Allison?
a good team, and you're adding him to the mix.
James Allison transformed Ferrari in 2015, and look what they did. They went and won 2 races, or 3 races. Mercedes just seem to excel in every department. And again, like we're saying, how Ferrari going off the radar in terms of being just silent with social media, like a social media blackout. Mercedes are still excelling there as well. They can happily plaster themselves all over social media. Both drivers are active on social media. They're not like, obviously Hamilton in the past has had problems with social media and telemetry data, but they don't have any issues with that. And this is the thing. And then also you said, with Ferrari trying to be innovative, it's obviously more recently we've seen the introduction of the shark fins and the T-wing, or the coat hanger, which I think that's the best, the better way of calling it. And of course, every other team, they've brought the T-wing, and it looks very clever and everything. And then Mercedes go, you know what? Let's try and put 2 wings on there.
Yeah,
let's make it a double wing.
Basically, make it a mini rear wing. They turned it from what was just a flow control device to actually creating its own individual downforce on the car, which is just so typical, like top team. Like, okay, yeah, you guys can use it to control some air. We'll try and make some extra downforce here in this area of the car. So Mercedes still got it going on. I mean, the amount of like complicated area they've got in that bargeboard area is it's sexual almost. It's crazy. And even though a lot of people have speculated that's what's going to cause some drag, the fact that Mercedes power unit's so powerful is they can just negate that drag. And you've seen that with Red Bull on the very opposite end of the spectrum with their Renault engine that still, has improved apparently, according to Renault and Red Bull. They still are a little bit down on Mercedes. And so
reliability looks a bit more dodgy this year for Renault, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Toro Rosso and Red Bull
Toro
hitting
Rosso
problems.
and Red Bull are struggling, yeah.
Yeah, Toro Rosso, once we get to that, it definitely was not a planned good testing for Toro Rosso. But, Red Bull, they've gone and surprised not everyone, but they surprised most of us with not bringing any kind of major upgrades. We thought that, okay, they've launched the car, very simple. But no, if we look back at Newey's interview that he did with Sky, that's their philosophy this year. Keep it real simple, cutting the drag, and when they want to bring the parts, they will do. But for now, they're keeping it simple, making sure the fundamental chassis shape philosophy is correct.
Is there more inside of that nose hole than we think?
The Pingu nose. That's what
the Pingu nose.
The Pingu nose.
I don't think there's. I think people are reading. Personally, I think people are reading too much into it. I honestly think it's not as complicated as people are thinking about that. But Red Bull, I think Newey said it best. This kind of shows how much Mercedes really are kind of at the pinnacle at the moment. Is Newey said that Mercedes are on a different level of maturity with their car. They're at that point where the engineers and everyone is so confident at their philosophy around that car that they can just come to the first test and have so many different parts and they're like, yep, bang, it works, it's all good. Whereas in the past you've seen, usually you would regard Red Bull at that higher maturity most of the time, especially in the previous era. Yeah. But now they're in that second category where they need to make sure the fundamentals are correct. And you could even say Ferrari are ahead of them in terms of a bit of maturity, in terms of Ferrari seem very confident on their philosophy. They've gone for a very, very audacious side pod shape, very different sort of winglets compared to Mercedes. And for now, seems to be... I mean, obviously you can't read anything into testing times, but it's not like they're horribly 5 seconds off everyone.
They're not at the bottom of the leaderboard, put it that way.
Well, this is sort of my speciality. This is the part where every year, it's almost like an Arsenal season where, you get hyped and then it all goes wrong and then you end up wanting the manager out by the end of it sort of thing every season, same thing every year. But here's a few stats. So obviously, with this season, this will be 10 years since Ferrari last won a World Drivers' Championship. A whole decade. Next year, 2018 would mark a whole decade since the last Constructors' title, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, the approach has not been good enough from Ferrari in the past decade. However, this year, I'm seeing more signs of the old Ferrari. I remember watching a Ross Brawn interview last year at Goodwood Festival, and exactly what Will Buxton said, Aarav. He said Ferrari need to go back to what it was like when he was there. They didn't talk much. They didn't promise much. They literally just turn up, similar to what Mercedes has been doing for the last few years, and just bang.
Just delivered.
Do it.
Just delivered and just go in. We are here. We are Ferrari. let's go win
Exactly.
races.
And literally, no one's been talking. Even in the few interviews that Kimi and Vettel have done, they've been very, very laid back and very cautious on their approach. And they look much better in principle to last year. Like Araf said, their car looks a bit more like they actually want to fancy themselves for having a go. We don't know what their power unit will be like this year. How much would it improve from last year? Obviously, Mercedes is a long, long way ahead, so they need to gain in some sort of other area. Their testing times have been pretty good. Obviously, I think they top the same amount of days as Mercedes.
Yeah, they top two
apiece.
Yeah.
Two apiece. So, Raikkonen looked pretty good. He looked pretty consistent. And, there was a small issue where they obviously broke down. I think it was on Wednesday, the third day of testing.
Right at the end of the
right
session,
at the end,
though,
Vettel broke down.
On the checkered flag, yeah. So
Yeah, but good reliability from the engine so far by the look of it. It doesn't seem as much of an engine-related problem, so that's good to see.
The saving grace thing for Ferrari engines is, I mean, obviously it may be more related to non-engine issues, but in terms of if you look at the kind of laps done, Ferrari engine cars are in the top 4. You've got Ferrari second, Sauber third, Haas fourth. Whereas you got Mercedes top, and then the next Mercedes car is all the way down in 7th, Force India. So, obviously, that's probably more due to actual car issues. We know Williams had the crash with Stroll. Force India just had a few niggles. But still, it's promising at least that you've got 3 Ferrari powered cars there.
I was genuinely
impressed. Reliability isn't their issue.
I mean, if you look at the amount of laps Ferrari did over a day with just one driver, they were doing far more than the next best team with one driver over a whole day. They were doing 120 plus every single day. And, you know, if they split it up like what Mercedes is doing, which their concept, I think, in my opinion, is brilliant because, you know, it makes it more interesting because the drivers don't get bored and they get maximum data performance out of that.
You're right with that, though. You honestly are right because by splitting the drivers, you've got 2 drivers at their peak performance.
That's why they've done so many more laps. That's why. It's only because of that.
Why? And I think Toro Rosso did it one day. Force India did it one day.
Renault did it once.
What's that? What's that test driver for Force India?
Shellis.
Yeah, he drove for a little bit, but literally everything Mercedes does, it just makes sense and it just works. Whereas Ferrari, to be fair, you are right with the way they've gone a little bit quieter because obviously one thing they have been tripped up on last year was strategy, and this year they've been trying to understand the tyres a lot more. Specifically, Tom, you told me the hard tyres because they've always struggled to switch the hard tyres on, so they've been putting in a lot of laps, and it's also a shame because Ferrari really haven't touched the ultra softs and the softs because their fastest lap time was on softs with Vettel, and that was 2/10 off Mercedes lap time on ultra softs. Obviously, there's no point in looking into that too much. But
Spain, there's a big argument about the fact that it's because it's so harsh on tyres that there's not going to be much more of a difference on the soft compounds. But I think it says a lot that in terms of if you look at compound to compound, that the fastest time on the soft, medium, and hard was all set by Sebastian Vettel. So I think it says a lot that they're definitely looking more towards the harder tyres, almost like Mercedes did last year. You remember when they just did medium tyres?
Yeah,
exactly.
Mediums,
But that's a good idea though, because you just get a really good base.
Because we saw last year,
all the
Mercedes were so confident on mediums. They, more often than not, they chose mediums sometimes compared to other teams that were choosing softs because they knew that tyre so well.
I remember those races where they put on the medium and you was like, you know, like when you think, oh yeah, definitely going to come in for a soft or a super soft, and then bang, they put on a medium and you're just like, whoa.
You got like the Mercedes hardcore fans going like, what the fuck have you done? Why have you put on this slow tyre? And then you think a little bit, it's like, but they know that tyre. They know how good their car is. And then we watched, more often than not, they just come through on the mediums anyway, and they've got great pace.
Exactly. So, I don't know. The first signs from Ferrari, for me as a Ferrari fan, obviously not a fanatic, let's not get that mistaken. I just have a sweet spot for them. They look very good so far, and I've got to say their approach has been better. They seem to be getting a better understanding. Their car looks more aggressive, more like they actually want to win something. Just the whole approach not saying much. Also, the fact they're using the harder tyres, because I'm not going to read too much into it. However, it's a curious stat because the fact that the fastest lap of the 1:19.7 that Bottas did, that lap was about 2.5 seconds faster than the pole time last year. So that's the first fairly representative / quick time that we've had because the estimate was 3 to 4, maybe 5 seconds faster. So that was a semi-competitive lap time. So if he's only 2/10 off on 2 compounds slower,
one question I do have for you two is: what do you think of the funky Ferrari side pods, the angry wide
Yeah,
new side pods.
I dig it.
I quite like
it.
them. I like the fact that Ferrari have tried it, to be honest.
It's
I
like
like
08
they've tried
cars.
something very different. They've tried something very different. They've chosen to, take that side pod inlet and keep it quite tight on the bottom face. Really try and tuck it in. And I like the fact they've gone a lot more aggressive than some other teams. In terms of some of the veins coming off the top of the chassis, like what I like to call like the horns coming off the top. They've really tried to manipulate the flow as much as they can, whereas, Mercedes gone for a bit of a cleaner version, and they've put it more towards the bottom of the car, whereas Ferrari kind of worked more on the top of the car. But we've never seen that from Ferrari. They've never been able to... It's always been like, their car looks, nice and tidy, but it does look simpler than the Mercedes.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to copy other teams, but just trying to be simple.
Yeah.
But
Or it's just
that's never really worked for
It's the
them.
first time that... It's the first time
It's the
they
Ferrari
innovated.
way. Like, as in... Last year, everyone started bringing out the ridiculous winglets, and they've sort of they're last to the party in that regard, but they've done it in a very extreme way. Because remember last year, everyone eventually started copying the serrated barge boards and the split barge boards that Mercedes had, and all that sort of complex side pod area, and they finally decided to actually venture into that with their own version. And also just little things like there's so many little winglets along like the chassis nose, and also they've implemented the S-duct for the first time, which they didn't run last year, which you'd think every team would have by now, and they finally got it.
I want to say, by the way,
So,
everyone keeps saying that, Ferrari ran it all the way back in 08. It's not the same sort of S-duct. It's a very different type of S-duct. They haven't ran this specific big S-duct like this on top of the chassis for the entire V6 era. So you can shut up about them being first.
There you go.
Just wanted to point that out.
Nip that in the bud, yeah.
Just want to nip that in the bud because, as usual, I get it, passionate fans, but they haven't ran it for a while. They've not been the first of the party.
It's been 9 years, put it that way.
Another thing I just wanted to know about Mercedes is, the level of detail we was talking about. If anyone noticed, obviously, I think Cal Yumi spoke about this, but the actual shark fin they ran for a day. There was actually a slot gap along the top of the shark fin all the way down, like a vent, like for the air to go inside. That's just along with the double coat hanger sort of thing. So it makes you realise the amount of detail.
Well, the Mercedes shark fin in general looks a lot more complex than any other team, because I'll use Force India because I think that's the most obvious, or even any other team really.
I think
it
you
just
had a good
looks
trace,
like
wasn't it?
It just looks like a stick on the back. It looks like someone's just literally plonked it there.
I think didn't
whereas,
you say like when it launched, Cal, you literally said it was like someone forgot to like cut the part of the metal.
Yeah, I'm not going to take full responsibility. I think someone put it on Twitter. It's honestly like when you've got one of them toy cars and you're putting it all together and you have to snap little bits off to finish it off, and it's like they haven't fully snapped it off yet. I don't know why Force India haven't put some sort of nice paintwork on there. It's a little bit frustrating in that regard, but just Mercedes just made it look a little bit more innovative. It just makes it look a little...
They used it a little bit better.
And also they tried their car without the shark fin. The only team to try it... I think the only team to try without the shark fin. And I think they got positive results from the shark fins. I think they are going to be using it.
You are going to get positive results. It does... There's a lot of people are saying, why are they there? In terms of like from an aesthetic standpoint, but from like an aero standpoint, like the performance, they're going to put it, even if they gain just a tiny bit of time, they're going to put it there because it does help quite a bit in the corners to keep the car stable.
Red Bull, should we
talked about Mercedes and Ferrari, so I guess we talked a little bit briefly about Red Bull. So keeping it simple on the car, a bit more kind of, as I said, Newey definitely wants to try and understand what their philosophy is completely. And I think he kind of said for the entire grid, as it aptly put, everyone's going to focus on that bargeboard area and that middle section between the nose and the tyre, basically. But they've gone a bit more cleaner, just clean, harsh lines. And I think probably between testing 2 in Australia, I think you'll see some development. But I honestly think they're just going to keep that car very nice and sleek and just try and cut the drag. And we know from last year, I don't think last year their car looked particularly, crazy compared to the Mercedes.
Wild, no.
Yeah, but you saw when it started to rain, or like Monaco, for example, their car just naturally was very, very good on downforce. It just
sticks to the road. I'm still convinced there's something there that no one can seem to spot, or something, or maybe underneath the car. There's something that's just... I don't know what it was. Like, Aarav, you were talking like the other week or last week over like the mill, saying, if Mercedes and Ferrari have done this, what's Newey going to do when he brings out the Red Bull? And they bring it out, and it's just like, oh,
Okay, that's interesting.
They've done
At the same
nothing.
time, though, that does mean potentially that, like you said, they want to keep it simple for now to understand everything. And maybe it's because he needs to get a full understanding of that air going through that section because he's going to try something absolutely insane.
You can. Do you know in that interview with Sky? Do you know when he said that? Oh yeah, our philosophy is simple, clean. Just try to understand the car because obviously a lot of teams and a lot of drivers and any media outlet say that the cars now in the first test aren't going to look anywhere near the same as what they're doing in Australia.
Oh yeah, no,
because obviously
for sure.
they're going to bring out loads of new bits because obviously they've understood little parts of the cars. And with Red Bull, you do kind of feel like they've got something up their sleeve. I'm not sure what, but the way Newey's saying it, it's like, right, we're going to understand it first, then we're going to slap something onto it,
He was
which
very coy.
no other team is going to really bring.
He was
Which-
very
Yeah.
coy about it.
It's quite
It just
exciting,
doesn't add up.
actually.
There's something there. There's
Because
something
I
in
feel
the
like they're
pipeline.
going to lose out. I think if they don't start to develop that area soon, let's say they turn up to Australia and they've still got very little around the cockpit area, around the barge board area, it would start to make you think, they're starting to lose out downforce.
If they're on pace and it's sort of like, wow, okay, so what are they doing in a different area that's so much better than
They'll be
anyone
better
else?
they'll be better in dirt, yeah, than most cars. I'll say that for a fact.
True.
Yeah,
true,
they would be, yeah.
True.
Well, that's the thing. Last year we got slated for saying that the Mercedes was one of the worst cars. Was one of the cars that was affected by dirty air the most. And a lot of people thought that was quite a ridiculous idea. But if you think about it, Mercedes was one of the most complicated cars and aero setups on the grid. It wouldn't surprise me if it was one of the most affected cars on the grid. And by putting it out there that Red Bull might be one of the least affected cars, with Max Verstappen at the wheel and Daniel Ricciardo, they'll be able to send one up the inside a lot easier than other teams, I think.
Yeah.
And they're going to get stuck behind drivers a lot less easier.
They'll be all over your tail lights, somewhere about that. They won't be falling behind. So
No.
it's an interesting. It's almost like a waiting for something to happen.
It's very Red Bull. It's very Red Bull. Like,
yeah.
I remember back in 2010 and 2011, it was the same thing. Like, what are they going to do? Like, surely they have something like this. They just keep you second guessing because it's just the fact they're Red Bull. So you just know that in the past they've just brought out these ridiculous things sometimes that are like, what the hell is that? So it's just that sort of anticipation that at some point, maybe not even Australia, at some point they'll just come out with something that is in that area of the car and it's going to look entirely different to what Mercedes and Ferrari have done. And you know that it's going to work well for them because they've studied it and they've worked on it for so many more races than other teams. So moving on to, from Red Bull, I guess, I don't know what the next team would really...
Force
probably.
India.
Williams, Force India, either of them two, because Williams had a solid test, whereas Force India didn't, but Force India obviously were quicker last season. So we'll probably just sweep at Williams, because Williams are quite an easy one. They had a very, very solid test when Massa was in the car. Massa seemed to go back up to speed quite quickly.
Big asterisks on that.
With the 4 month, whereas 4 months ago he thought he was retiring to get back into the car and put in some solid laps. I think he put in around about, I'm not sure the exact amount of laps, but he put in at least 100 laps on the first day, which was very solid for
which is
Williams.
about half the entire laps they had.
Yeah, and with Williams...
And then Stroll, well...
Yeah, Stroll, he did get quite a bit of stick. Tom, with his very good pun on Twitter, Stroll, what was it? Williams,
he got too cocky. He thought he could just stroll on into F1 and it'd be easy, but no.
It is a shame. Do you know what my perspective on Lance Stroll is? It's not the fact that, okay, the Formula 1 drivers, they're paid to crash, basically, because if they're not pushing, what's the point in employing them? And that makes sense and everything, but day 2, he span and broke a little bit of the front wing, I think, whilst spinning through the gravel trap, so they lost a little bit of a part on the front wing, and Williams didn't have a replacement front wing, which it did kind of ring some alarm bells, because you'd think they'd bring at least one, which is a little bit strange, unless they're trying to develop a new front wing.
Well, I mean, Red Bull have done it before, haven't they? Like,
yeah, when
when
because they ran without a front wing, didn't they?
Without a front wing. Oh, you need this data. Without the front wing, important data.
Stroll, I think, and then Stroll crashed on day 3 as well. Actually, properly
Well, that
crashed.
one was worse because they cracked the chassis, so they couldn't use it.
And that completely cut out all of day 4 running, which, in hindsight, might not have been a bad thing
for a lot of teams.
because apparently the wet weather test was literally pointless. A lot of the drivers said it was pointless, but still, to lose out an entire day's running and to put so much damage onto the car already, it's just not helpful for a team that's an independent team like Williams.
Yeah. Well, the wet weather
kinda
thing,
need as
we'll
many
get into
laps as
that.
you need.
That's
Yeah,
a
we'll talk about that later.
touch on, but it's only good for one team. I'll put it that way, and we'll get into that in a minute.
But I don't know what you two think, but it's just not.
There's not much to say about
Still
Williams.
doing
They're just doing their thing. Their car looks very simple. Same livery as the last 3, 4, 5 years.
2014.
They've brought back a retired driver. They got an inexperienced teenager. Personally, the signs aren't great. I don't think.
It doesn't look amazing.
I don't think they'll be trumping Force India, in my opinion. So, speaking of which, I personally, shark fin aside, I like their car.
I think the rest of the livery looks decent.
It's grown on me. It looks nice with the sunshine on it. It's a nice looking car.
It looks decent, but that doesn't hide the fact that they've had a bit of a bumpy start. They didn't. I think they had a few issues with, I think, oil pressure. I'm not overly sure what they were struggling with, and then they did put obviously the test driver in as well. I don't think they've had the ideal start, but the car looks reasonably complicated. The funky nose, which kind of looks like a 2014 nose with like the long nose, obviously, but it is connected at the bottom, which doesn't look that aesthetically pleasing. I'm not sure what you two think about it, but if it gains downforce, then I don't think they're going to be. They're not going to be hiding from it. I like their old twin nose old front wing from last year.
I like it. Or to be fair, basically, it's just like Lara said in his video. They just haven't painted the front like last year, but it's good to see. Like Force India, you're starting to realise, and they're starting to look like, you look at that car and you think to yourself, that is not a team that came last in the World Championship 9 years ago. Like, they look decent. Yeah. They're starting to really get there.
And
you know,
they weren't their own philosophy here.
They weren't lying when they said they wanted to push for the top 3. That car does look like they want more. I think that just
shows how good the Mercedes power unit is.
You know, they're getting, but the car actually itself, it doesn't look like, it's not like, it's not a very simple car that, thanks to the engine, they're getting performance out of it. Like, you can see that they're also, with their limited budget and resources, they are actually trying stuff with their car. So, it's good to see. And I think, at the moment, I'm going to make the prediction, but I think they'll easily be the 4th best team on the grid.
That's probably not too difficult for them, I don't think, because we're probably going to speak about McLaren next, but I don't think...
I think Force India could challenge Red Bull for the first race of the season.
I couldn't. If that happens, I'll love it. But the only team that I can maybe think that could possibly challenge them, well, I don't know, because we haven't really seen from the bottom half, which we're probably going to speak about in a minute.
We haven't seen what
Toro
I
Rosso
think
are interesting.
If they get their act together, Toro Rosso could be a bit of a dark horse, but
Renault we're not so sure about.
Renault look a dark horse for me. I think they've got something up their sleeve. I think because the fact their engine is 95% new, I think they're taking it very easy. I don't know. I think Renault have got something. I think
this
Force
year,
India, Renault, Toro Rosso. Yeah. Or at least on their car, anyway.
1 lap less
on
than
their car.
Did.
Yeah.
1 lap less.
It's hard to do a proper pecking order, to be honest, for the midfield, because obviously it was up and down all last season.
Because you had Toro Rosso with issues with their engine, and then also generally people are thinking that even if they do get the engine issue sorted with Renault, that the Toro Rosso, even though it looks very complex, because of that Renault engine, it's a bad mixture, and actually they should maybe try and simplify their car a little bit, because it's quite draggy. It looks very draggy. So I think they need to maybe rethink a little bit and go the Red Bull route of simplifying some areas. If they had a Mercedes engine or like a Ferrari engine, then I'll be saying like, oh yeah, top car. I think it's real decent, but I think actually the complexity of their car is probably going to hinder them at the moment.
I think an outside shot is Haas. That's a decent dark horse this year.
I'm not so sure. Haas looked decent on the 4th day when they put plenty of laps in the wet weather, which I suppose...
No, but Magnussen got 4th a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken.
They were up there.
He was right next to Red Bull in terms of pace. Obviously, I know we can't read into it.
It's very difficult. To be fair, one thing about Toro Rosso, which did make me laugh, and I did tweet about it, was the fact that Toro Rosso... Well, Sainz was happy about this, but Toro Rosso weren't. Toro Rosso were disappointed that Mercedes had a similar car to them. let me just think about that a minute. Why would Toro Rosso be disappointed with having a similar car to the world champions, who are looking decent? I don't get the philosophy behind that at all, because obviously Mercedes and Toro Rosso are the only two teams on the grid to have that sort of nose where it's just a concept
I think
normal
specifically
nose.
They didn't like that person who photoshopped the car, the Mercedes and Toro Rosso split, and it looked so similar. Apart
It's
from
so
like
identical.
from a few details.
Also, I don't know whether you've seen the innovative front suspension. So they've tried to raise the suspension arms as high as possible.
That's the other thing. Both of those teams, I think that's what they mean. Like, there's so many aspects of those two cars that are similar.
Yeah.
Sort of like, it's almost like the engineers were peeved off that, we weren't as innovative as we thought because Mercedes did it as well.
But that's the thing. It's just like, I still don't get why they'd be disappointed with having the same similar suspension setup, because obviously, I think Ted Kravitz said that because obviously they tried to raise the suspension arms and the axles as high as possible, it reduces the amount of camber and the flexibility they could have with the camber and the toe and everything. But I still don't get the philosophy behind the fact that Toro Rosso were disappointed that they had a similar car to Mercedes. It doesn't make any sense. Toro Rosso, bearing in mind, they were very bottom midfield last season, by the end of last season at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something doesn't add up there. But Sainz was happy with it. He was like, "Oh yeah, boy, I've got a similar car to Mercedes."
Last season, you could really notice their engine was it was letting them down so much, because last season's car looked really good for them, but the engine, it really started to pay they paid the price for that in the second half of the season. Definitely, you could really notice how they really dropped, because in the street circuits like Singapore and Monaco, they looked half decent around there.
Yeah, they did.
So, and this is where obviously we'll talk about that issue with another team later on this year, who I think will really struggle. But
to be fair,
I think going back to what we were saying, Force India and Williams look good. I think Force India look 10 times better than Williams, in my opinion, because they actually want to try something different, whereas Williams has gone safe in every department possible. I will say for Williams, the good thing about them is they hired a lot of good staff over the winter, which could be building for next year possibly. Then after that, that's true. Oh, I won't say Sal. I was going to say, first of all, shout out Toro Rosso, best delivery on the grid, best delivery in years.
Beautiful.
You guys absolutely smashed it with that. That was absolutely insane to see. Like the best till last, the last car to be revealed. Incredible stuff to see, and it's good to see that. What I like about Toro Rosso is all these years, almost they haven't been allowed to speak because they're behind Red Bull. But I'm almost getting the impression now, last year and this year, they fancy themselves to actually jump them. Because the fact that they were disappointed that their car was like Mercedes' car and not have any sort of thought about Red Bull makes you realise, wow, maybe they do genuinely want to really step forward, which is good to see.
Well, that brother-sister relationship that Red Bull and Toro Rosso have, has definitely over the last couple of years, definitely seems to be splitting apart.
It's diverged, yeah.
It is going further and further away. Obviously, the only thing that's really keeping them together is the fact that both teams are owned by the exact same
and the driver program.
And the driver program that's keeping them together. Apart from that, Toro Rosso are very much independent, and they're decent on their own. That's the thing. It's not like Red Bull have just let them go and then they slump straight to the bottom. They've still held themselves quite well there. The only issue is they can have the nice livery and they can have some very nice looking aero. They had the least amount of laps at this opening test.
Reliability very poor.
Reliability was a struggle for them. So hopefully they can get on top of that. Obviously, also McLaren said this as well. I'm probably going to move on to McLaren. The whole cliche of, it doesn't. Hopefully, as long as we can iron out the bumps now in testing, we're fine. Yeah, but that's still
can't iron out a shite engine.
You can't iron out that. And if you lose out laps in testing, do not sit there and say that it doesn't affect you in the long run, because it does. Because Mercedes have proved that over the last couple of years.
I care less about the issue right now because obviously my driver's not there anymore. I would have cared a lot more. I would have been absolutely fuming if my driver was still there, but now I don't care as much. But if I still was wanting to support McLaren, I would be fuming. Like, honestly, the amount of promises they made at the end of last season, like, the Honda is going to get reworked, it's going to be great, we're going to get right up there for maybe a podium or something.
Well,
I've got a feeling with McLaren, they are building towards next year.
But they're doing that for every fucking season.
No, but
I'm not being funny.
It's the third year.
No, because
if you're a third year in Formula One,
Yeah, I know.
You should
but
sort out
even
your
Zach
engine.
Brown confirmed that, next year's when they're going to finally have a title sponsor. I'm just getting the impression with the whole sort of Ron Dennis exit thing towards the end of last season, with staff in and out of the team, Zach Brown coming in quite late. It just doesn't feel like they're ready yet. And
It's McLaren though.
I will say one thing.
It's McLaren.
Like I said, the one team that did benefit from the wet testing was them, because they actually turned more laps on that day than any other day. I think 73 laps, if I'm not mistaken, on the fourth day of testing. So they've finally got some laps on the board on the last day of testing to sort of take a bit of pressure off, because, if they'd struggled that day, then obviously there would have been quite a fair few eyebrows raised if they hadn't got any solid running in by the fourth day of testing.
They put the most amount of laps in the day that was probably the least effective.
Basically, yeah.
Not
but they needed laps. They needed laps, so any laps for them were good.
Day one, they had 27 laps or something like that. I think
overall,
Alonso lost a lot of running.
McLaren, their car looks alright, decent. I thought they would have been a bit more ambitious. Also, the best thing about their car at the moment is delivery, so that's where they are at the moment. So
even that's not amazing.
I
still don't get that white bit
on
the side pod.
I don't.
What
get
is
that?
Like, what is that? I'm not sure.
I like it. I think it's alright.
Even if they get reliability down, it doesn't look like the engine's better than last year, like any better.
Well, apparently Honda and also Renault, I don't know whether Ferrari have as well, but they've tried to basically, instead of copying Mercedes, they're trying something new. And the thing is, Mercedes are unstoppable at the minute in terms of their engine department, because every year they just get more and more stronger. Apparently they could push 1,000 brake horsepower if they wanted to. But I don't know. There's just something about them keep trying something new, just delays them getting back to the front again. And eventually, yeah, they might get it right. But I know they want to try and make it all Coke bottle at the back and make it really tight packaging, because that's what McLaren want and that's what Honda want as well. They want it very tightly packed at the back, which is probably why they've had so many troubles over the past couple of years, because of overheating and this, that, and the other. But I don't know. I just feel like they need to get a solid base first.
I think Honda have underestimated what they need to do. I think Honda have just completely.
They've
not really. When they came into the sport, I think they thought it would be easier than what it was. I think they honestly thought they could catch up faster, and they've not really taken into account that you've got teams like Ferrari, which have been started a lot stronger than them, and they themselves haven't caught up.
Yeah, that's just.
And they're promising to catch up to these teams magically and become like a top 3 team again. It's just not going to happen.
The only justification for a successful season for them this year is they have to be minimum the 4th best team on the grid.
Yeah, I think anything less.
I think
anything less, podiums. And they can eat their own words.
Because it's not as much as
they have to be what Force India were last year, minimum.
Yeah,
simple as that.
They need to be pushing that area.
So
they need to be getting on the podium now before
pressure's
they start
on.
to get respected again.
I think their driver lineup is interesting.
McLaren.
I think, honestly, I'm going to call it now. Alonso walks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even at the presentation, his body language doesn't look right. Yeah.
He from the launch of the car to testing, he already looks more depressed.
He's walking.
Right? He's walking. He's walking. I don't think he enjoys these cars any more than he did last year.
So you know what that means? Hashtag JB 2018. Yeah. Back in the game.
Well,
honestly, I wouldn't want him to back in this McLaren. Honestly, I wouldn't.
Yeah, to be fair, that'd just be ruining his career. To be honest, that's just kind of like dragging it out.
But
Alonso has been like ranting and raving. Have you seen he's been raving about the fact that the cars? There's like, oh yeah, we should forget that old period. I'm not being funny or anything, but if you had a season in a McLaren Honda, 2 seasons in a McLaren Honda, and just be at the back, I think you would want to forget that era. If you're Lewis Hamilton or Nico Rosberg, you'd be like, yeah, that V6 era. Best era in Formula 1.
Yeah. Should we move on to Sauber? Because I think they surprised me with the amount of laps they were actually turning. And they didn't have too many niggles. Obviously,
it's a proven product, 2016 engine.
Downforce doesn't look there. Obviously, they're fastest in the speed trap. Probably because of lack of aero. But, they've looked worse.
They're not being too badly affected by the 2016 engine yet. But then again, I remember even watching one of our old podcasts, we said that eventually the Toro Rosso
just like Toro Rosso, they'll come crashing down a little bit.
Well, there has been shades of like a Toro Rosso vibe to it. If you compare the aero over the last few years to this year, they've tried their hardest to do what they can with the aero. Like the airbox area looks quite different to other cars. Their front wing looks, slightly better than other seasons. Just the whole package looks pretty decent compared to other seasons. Even the livery as well actually makes a change. It looks like a nice livery.
Decent,
It looks like they've tried, but the question is just the engine. Will it catch up to them? Unfortunately, Man aren't on the grid anymore, so if they're back markers, they're going to be roaming solo at the back of the grid. So, Sauber, transitional year, because obviously the prize money from last season will get paid at the end of this season. So,
yeah, so
that's for next year.
It's interesting for
if they survive.
Sauber. Props to Antonio Giovinazzi, actually, because he did very solidly in the opportunity that he was given to turn some laps. He didn't bin it. I think he had like a spin, but a solid little replacement for Verline, which apparently Verline was quite precautionary. Apparently he could be in the car, but it was like
make sure.
It would just double make sure. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum,
obviously the stress on the neck.
Yeah, I think the stress on the neck. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, some people are saying that he's not going to make Australia. So some people don't know. I don't think even he knows.
It's a mysterious
what's
injury. Well, the thing is, his injury, I don't know if you read it or not, but apparently he wasn't wearing a hands device when he rolled over at ROC.
Oh.
So, apparently that was the reason for it. That's why it's so bad. Well, bad, in inverted commas, like a dubious situation, because no one knows. Apparently I really wasn't wearing the hands device, I wasn't connected properly, one or the other. But at the same time, what you're saying, Carl, I've still heard he could be back for the next test next week.
Yeah,
so...
some people are saying that he could have been in the car this week. Some
Who knows?
People say that he'll be back next week. Some people saying he will even miss Australia. So I think if he rocks up at Australia with no laps under his belt, that would be a bit of a disadvantage for him, because Marcus Ericsson seems to be very solid, like fairly solid. He's been turning some serious laps, and yeah, they have been decent. It's just the car's not very complex.
Well, at the moment it's a good start for them, but they'll probably just fall behind again.
Honestly, it's just one of them ones where who could you see like tussing it up with them? Because last year, if you look at who was lingering low, Renault were quite low last year. They were tussling with Manners and Saubers at one point. They're going to be far out of that sort of battle now.
I think Sauber will be battling with McLaren. There you go.
To the back of the round. Oh wow, you're really thinking McLaren going to be low?
Yeah.
I'm still thinking. To be fair, I don't think I can predict it yet, but because I'd like Haas popped into my head, but after a good preseason test so far, I'm not so sure. But we can probably speak about Renault because they've had.
I'm going to go for a shout. I'm going to say Williams will drop quite far this year.
Oh wow. To be fair, that's a very Williams thing to do.
Well, I can't see a development there, so I'm going to predict my driver on this and say they're basically to convert to back marker status with Sauber.
Yeah. Well, what are we thinking about Renault? Because they've had a solid test. I can't, too far off the top of my head, nothing really to speak about Renault. I think they're just getting on with it.
They've been quite quiet.
Still hasn't released his helmet, which is...
They've been quite quiet. I think they just like you said, getting on with it. One less lap than Red Bull.
Looking good, though.
Laps done.
I think that looks like a car that will be in the top 6, as in top 6 best teams.
Yeah. The release was a bit over dramatic, I think, when they kept having interviews with everybody department and every sponsor and market.
It's alright.
It's alright and everything, because you can see what they want. But we see this with McLaren, and they can say how much they want. That doesn't mean they're going to get it.
What I like about them is...
that's the thing, I think we almost, at the minute, we think that McLaren should just shut up and just get on with it. And I think Renault don't want to bank on that too much, otherwise they'll go down the same route as McLaren.
Well, what stood out to me from Renault was their ambition in regard to when they said, what was your goal? What is your goal for this season? And they said, we want to be the 5th best team in the constructors, which is like, that's respectable. That's a respectable goal, not being too over the top. And I just feel, because that is their goal, I just feel like there could be a dark horse, because that tells me that they've been very laid back, so there could be something in the tank there for them to possibly go one step further. Obviously, because they're properly investing in this car now. It's not like last year where they sort of gave up on it from the start. They will actually try to upgrade this car as the season goes on, and they've got money to spend. So that could be a car that progresses quite nicely over the season. Renault will be ahead of Williams for me this season. That's
yeah,
a change. I'm going to see.
I would like for that
there.
to happen. I think I would like to see Renault up there. It would be quite nice, and especially for Hulkenberg. I think already probably
if
thinking it's a good
Hulkenberg's
move.
behind Williams and Force India,
I think Hulkenberg. I think Hulkenberg's already
pissed.
thinking it's a good move because from last season to now, just testing, they already look a little bit better. If they just continue to improve like this steadily, I think they're on a good.
I think
path
it's a long-term project because if you look at it on paper right now, will Renault finish at a full senior by the end of the season as it looks right now?
Probably not.
Don't think so. But
I think they'll be close.
Renault's improvement has been pretty good over the winter. You can see their car looks way more fancy and like they've actually tried to do some fancy stuff on it. So, it's one to keep an eye out on. Renault's one of them teams that they could be building for 2019 already. They're a team that likes to build for the future.
Shout out to Palmer for the slowest spin in Formula 1, by the way.
Yeah.
If anyone didn't see that.
Slow-mo spin.
Yeah, he span coming out of turn 2 and
see the shark fin wobbling away on it.
Yeah, it was one of the slow. I loved, just on a side note, I loved all of the videos that was put onto social media. I love the direction that we didn't think there'd be this much of a step forward, but Ross Brawn said that with new Liberty Media. They're from that background anyway, so literally they've just walked in and they've gone, right, okay, yeah, teams, you can just film your cars.
Make those videos, teams, go. Well,
I think Hamilton did
and also
Instagram
the Formula
Live
1
in his car.
YouTube account's been uploading little testing highlights, which they then do. I like that. I'm liking the vibe that they're already starting to just become a bit more engaged.
The fact
online.
they want a cost cap, Ross Brawn wants to do like a race which doesn't classify for the World Championship,
special
just to test new race formats.
Bang
get rid of the shark fin, get rid of the coat hanger. It's all these sort of things, and also an article's popped up while we've been doing this podcast with Christian Horner, an interview with him by motorsport.com, and it says TV should not fear new F1 social media freedom. Obviously, more in depth to that, it's Red Bull boss Christian Horner hopes that Formula One's television companies do not resist the opening up of video use on social media, which is what we've been talking about. It's good just to see the freedom, things being more open. And we can only hope that this is a catalyst, like we mentioned in the past podcast when we said, so far the first steps of Liberty Media look good. This can only be like a catalyst or a continuation
this is only the pre-season test, isn't
good
it?
moves. Exactly.
Good enough.
So, the 21 Super Bowls thing, it's all bubbling away quite nicely at the moment. So
I think before we move fully on to Ross Brawn, just very quickly, Haas, I think, Kevin Magnussen becomes the first driver to test all V6 engines, which I find quite weird, actually. He's been around, he has, Kevin Magnussen.
Chomping
tried
around everywhere.
every single... He's had the Mercedes, he's had the Honda, he's had the Renault, and now he's at the apparently he hasn't found much difference, apparently, which was a little bit
in the way
strange.
they act.
Yeah, so... People are like, we might get an advantage here. Probably not. But other than that, I think very solid. I think Grosjean was fairly happy in the car as well.
Car looks, for a second-year team,
look good.
Looks very nice.
Look good. Yeah, and also, like we said about the Mercedes Toro side by side, cut in the middle. The Haas and the Ferrari one.
They've taken some inspiration. These look good. Although they still apparently have that niggling brake issue from last year, which
which
fully
I hope doesn't fuck them up, because that's something that they really needed to iron out before 2017. Because that's like a first-year issue, and you kind of think, we'll let them off just because it's the first season. But if that carries on into 2017, that's something deep within the team that's going wrong, and someone needs to get fired for it. I think like it'll get to that point where they'll have to try and find the problem there. But other than that, I think that's every team. Sad times. It's only 10 teams. No manner on the list. But we've spoke briefly about Ross Brawn. But I don't know if anyone who watching the podcast or listening to it hasn't watched the interview on... I think you just find it on the official Formula 1 YouTube channel.
You can watch it for free. It's
free. New era of Formula 1, it's coming. And he basically did go over the fact that the T-wings and the shark fins should be gone. He'll he and a group of engineers will find a way to get rid of it, probably next season. I doubt they'll get rid of it this season. Also mentioned about DRS. They're only going to remove DRS when they can fix front wings and.
Well, it's like what we said. It's like what we said. It's like you can't just remove it, because they're there for a reason. They do a job that the cars don't do themselves, which is actually getting them to overtake.
Yeah, like they're actually using their brain. They're putting two together.
They're actually thinking about it. Like he said, what the best part was getting a group of private engineers together as a group to figure this out. They're not just going like majority of fans have gone, like, just get rid of it. It's like you're not thinking about why it's there in the first place.
He wants to also think of the best way to think of a new strategy, decision thing, committee thing, because obviously the new ones.
Yeah, it just doesn't work, because you've got people like Red Bull going, should we get rid of shark fins, guys? They look fucking ugly. And then everyone going, nah, mate.
Yeah, just a little caveat on the opening up of obviously like F1 as a sport on social media and obviously video platforms. In this particular interview, and I quote Christian Horner, he said, there we go, we've certainly put out a lot of content regarding, as in referring to the sport itself, and he said they've even put me on Instagram, as in Christian Horner's now on Instagram.
Oh yeah,
so
he's got
drop him a
Instagram,
follow. So it just goes to show it's good. You know, it's good for the fans, which is what Horner's saying. And you know, as much as I think, well, I don't, but a lot of people still sort of have that niggling hate for Red Bull and Horner for being a bit of a controversial figure for things you said in the past. Genuinely, you can see now, because they're taking a backseat to winning all the time, he does care about the fans, which is good to see. And it's just good to see that we've only been a few months in, and the first steps are looking
there's already been some,
better for the younger audience. So it's good.
Well, also with Ross Bourne saying stuff like he wants to introduce these test races or just one-off races, because that's from the background that he first started in motorsport. That was the normal, that they used to have these one-off little races. And when you think about it, the way he wants to do one-off races, teams can turn up, they can bring young drivers, they can bring their own drivers, it really doesn't matter, and it's just all about testing race formats, testing qualifying formats. Obviously, we know what happened this time last year when they released the new qualifying format, which wasn't tested, and then you can also ruin the start of the season.
Because it's not a championship race, you can drop the race price for it to buy a ticket to it as well. It's a fun event.
Overall, the problem there is obviously teams like Sauber, could they afford to turn up these sort of things? That's where I think F1 would have to.
It'll be European, obviously. It'll be a European race.
F1 would have to maybe fund part of it for every team, or at least ones that are struggling. That there would have to be some way to, because it wouldn't be a proper broadcast event, I'm guessing, you know, because it's not a World Championship event. So where would you draw the financials from?
Something I'd probably see from it is that I'm not sure. I think the teams would be like, "What's in it for me?"
Exactly.
If we turn up, what do we gain from it? And there's got to be some sort of gain from it. Obviously, they can't do championship points, but there's got to be something that helps them along, because I think it'd be good, because it gives actual young drivers a chance to race, not only just test.
Or maybe make it
they
like
can drive as many laps as they want. They get onto the track and they crash. What's the point?
They can. There's loads of ways you can go about it. Maybe like, even for example, if it's just like one car per team and test drivers only or something. So Giovinazzi, Ferrucci for Haas, Chellis for Force India. These sort of, I don't know, something like that. You know,
Sorokin.
Like that sort of thing.
Some of the GP2 graduates. So if you
Gasly for Red Bull.
Norris
I don't know.
for McLaren.
Exactly. Like, just, I don't know, something where you can sort of grey it out a bit and not make it so...
Because it also then helps, it also just helps spectators also get a climb to the kind of younger drivers, because I think...
And do the cheap price. I agree with that.
I've been quite surprised with, obviously, with my series on YouTube, I bring in a lot of different drivers that obviously would be old enough by the time I've got to 2019. I'm actually quite surprised at how many people are like, who the hell is this guy you've got in the car? It's like, don't even know some of these guys. Like, you know, it just also introduces you to these the next stars potentially of F1.
Well, some people, not everyone obviously watches GP2, GP3, so people are a little bit, not ignorant, but they go, who's this? And they'll...
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, even I'm like, the only reason I know about some of these drivers is because I look around for the series I do, but it would help out, just to get them kind of accustomed to these may be your next stars of F1 once the current
also
stars...
Also just the Formula 1 world as well, like interviews and stuff, because obviously it is a step up getting into Formula 1. I think all round it helps every department of Formula 1. And obviously it probably would just be a European race and everything. Also, actually, very quickly talking about tracks, did you see the contracts that have been signed? Canada, 2029... Wait, 2029.
Yep.
Absolutely balling.
That's
lovely.
A long
decent
contract.
Hopefully the next one's Silverstone. Get Silverstone tied down. That'll be good.
Not being fun or anything, but last season we were discussing whether or not we'll see Canada on the
now it's in forever. Love it.
2020. That's like
at
first I thought it was like
a
typo. Honestly, I thought it was a typo. I thought
See,
it's
that's
like
another
2019.
thing. That's another thing. You don't have Bernie extorting money out of the circuits now. Liberty can just have an honest deal with them. This is an honest deal for everyone involved. It's going to be this price.
Hi,
in my opinion,
we'd like
there
to
has
race
to be
at your
a way.
track.
The main focus of Liberty Media now, priority number one, is to lower the costs in the sport to the extent of F1 is a less expensive sport to get into as a team. And then basically that filters down all the way down to the fans paying less money for tickets to go into the actual events themselves, and therefore seeing tracks like Hockenheim on the calendar every year. That's like the main goal for me.
It's turning the sport more into a cash flow than a cash pump right into their back pockets.
Yeah. Also Russia as well, which I don't think anyone really cares about, but that's going to be on the grid on the calendar till 2025. Very weird saying these numbers.
I don't mind. The last two races have been alright. So
Russia, it's a bit of an air race, but that's going to be on the grid as well. So on the calendar.
I think honestly, they need to take a bulldozer a little bit and just scrape the ground, give it some character. It's quite flat and just boring in terms of there's not much because there's not been much racing. The track itself doesn't. There's no characteristics. There's no graining on the tyre that much. There's not like.
It's too brand new.
Yeah, it's too brand new. It's that brand new effect.
That's why I didn't like Kota in 2012 because it just looked too new. But then now I love Kota.
Yeah, now it's great.
Worn in. It's a proper.
It's got its own characteristics.
It's got character. And also, it was when it was built, it was giving characteristics. So like Turn 1, for example, they wanted it to be highly elevated, and that's amazing. That's really good for this. It means lots more heavier braking and really big diving manoeuvres at Turn 1. On lap 1, there's more incidents and everything, and just Russia, it's just flat everywhere. And I know the whole character behind it is going around the Winter Olympic Park, but that's not interesting to us, really. As a Formula 1 fan, we don't care if they're going past a skiing
So I love that they changed just the look of it a little bit. Like I feel like you're just so many white walls everywhere. It's just change it up a little bit. Just get some paint out, lads.
Yeah, but I think that is everything.
I think so.
First test. And all the news. It's been a beefy podcast.
It's been a beefy one.
There's been quite a bit of news.
I think the second testing one's going to be as beefy because we have to also just talk about the cars in general for the first time ever on the podcast. But
is the next one the last one?
Before the pre-season.
Before Australia.
Australia. I think so. So I think it'll be. I think we'll do one for testing too. Obviously,
could see a few cheeky lap times.
Yeah, and then obviously we'll do one just before Australia, previewing it. Essentially, I think
season predictions.
And then we'll get I think in that one we'll do the season predictions, and then we'll get the ball rolling.
Crack on
with the season starts in 3 weeks. So if you guys have enjoyed this one, hit that like button. Also, I didn't even mention it at the start, but it's been on the screen the entire time. We are now on SoundCloud, so check us out there. But I still think it was clear from last episode, the first time we'd done it, that even though there were a fair few of you that were really liking the SoundCloud, I think obviously most people just watch us on YouTube. That's our kind of home, our little kind of baby where we started. So either way though, check us out. I'm just waffling at this point. Check us out on SoundCloud. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. And you don't have to subscribe to this channel for the podcast. Check out these two and all three of us on Twitter as well. Links above us. But that has been the first podcast for testing. We'll see you next week for testing number 2 podcasts. We'll see you then. Hope you enjoyed your day. Goodbye.